Dear students, no matter where you are, I just hope that you are safe, healthy, and happy. Due to the coronavirus, the university has decided that everyone should learn the lectures on, as it is in the best interest of every student's well-being. Now, no matter what happens, this event is going to be an epic story that we can tell our grandkids in the future. I wish that this online learning can be as effective as the face-to-face learning, and by the end of this lecture, you should be able to learn how political issues can seriously affect a business. One of the most recent political issues is the US-China trade war. Now, before we go in depth into the Chinese-US trade war, I would like you to have a number in mind to think about 45 years ago, which country has a bigger GDP? Is it US or is it China? And also, I would like you to think about how big it is, how big it is the difference between the GDP of these two countries 45 years ago. Ready? So for the students who guessed that US has a higher GDP, then you are correct. But have you guessed it that US GDP 45 years ago is actually 16 to 17 times bigger than China? As China 45 years ago, their GDP is only around 6% of US GDP. Okay, so if US GDP 45 years ago is around 16 to 17 times bigger than Chinese GDP, what do you think is the GDP nowadays over the last few years? Ready? Students who think that Chinese GDP has catch up or bigger already over the last few years might have to slow down a little bit. However, we have to say that over the last 40 years, the Chinese GDP have been catching up really quick. So 45 years ago, US GDP is 15 to 17 times bigger than Chinese GDP. However, over the last few years, Chinese GDP has been catching up very quickly and dramatically, and right now, the GDP of US is less than 2 times larger than Chinese GDP. Now, next look at the next picture. So, previous picture, we see that even Chinese GDP has not exceeded US GDP over the last few years. However, the purchasing power over the last few years already exceeded US. A study conducted by Southern and Liu during 2018, they found out that the US and China trade deficit have been gradually weakened over the recent years. US President Donald Trump argues that the growing deficit is because that China is unfairly restricting the export goods from US, but at the same time it is boosting the domestic goods from China. Now, fairly speaking, having a trade deficit is not always a bad thing, because imagine this, US are able to buy more cheaper material from China, and using those cheaper materials, they can produce the higher end goods and sell it to other countries. Now, however, there's an argument that China is kind of taking advantage of US with its Chinese trading laws and subsidies. Some of the main reasons are because the rules and policies in China, they are more favorable for the Chinese companies. Some of the examples could include like some of the influential Chinese companies are subsidized to pay less tax, and in more extreme cases, other influential companies are receiving lands and buildings from Chinese government, and those lands and buildings are in the strategic locations. Okay, now, so how did the US-Chinese trade war started? So it started at July 2008 when Donald Trump decided to use a tariff of 25% on 34 billion worth of product for China. Now, this increase of 25% in tariff actually doubled the tariff rate of Chinese import from 3.8% to 6.7%. Now, in a nutshell, people might think that, oh, US doubling their tariff, then that is going to be very beneficial for US. Is that correct? Well, in reality, it's not really beneficial for the US because what happened is that those tax rates are passed on to the American company and to the American citizens. In addition, for every increase in tariff from US, China is also increasing its tariff. So the average of the tariff actually started, as you can see from the graph, started from around 5 to 10% and it increased to nowadays around 20%, and it started the trade war. Now, we know that 34 billion is a lot of money. However, it is not really clear at this stage how many business or how many industries got affected by this increase in tariff. So I did a deeper research and I found out that 1,300 Chinese products are targeted by the Trump administration, which means 1,300 products from China has an increase in tax for around 5 to 25%. And just to name a few, they include pharmaceutical products, aircraft, rail line, ships, watches. So if you can see the list from the paper, it just shows you around 20 main product category out of 1,300 Chinese products. The one that get hit the most is the machinery, which accounts to 19.5 billion. And second is the electronics, which account for 13.5 billion. And the third one is the optical instruments, which accounts for 6.4 billion. And it follows by vehicle for 2.1 billion and aluminum products for 1.3 billion. Now, even though a while ago from the graph that we have seen, we know that China has imported a lot less goods from US, which is around 5 times less than US imports. Now, however, China also have 106 products from US that increased the tariff from 5 to 25%. And to name a few, they are chemical products, cotton, soap, tobacco, or the cigarette. And others include the beverage and aircraft. Now, once again, if you look at the picture on the right, you will see those are 20 out of 106 products that get affected during the trade war. And the one that affects the most is the oil seed, which is account for 12.4 billion. And then second that got affected is the US vehicles, which accounts for 7 billion. Third is the plastic, which is 3.3 billion. And it follows by mineral fuels, 1.7 billion, and cereals for 1.3 billion. Now, in most of the political issues, usually it involves between one country and another country. Rarely in the political arguments, there are involvement between one country and one company. However, for this US and China trade war, there is one main company that got affected, and this company is one of the top 5 mobile communication company, Huawei. So in May 2019, President Trump administration issued an executive order which not only stopping the American countries from supplying Huawei with their components, it also tried to stop the companies in US from using the equipment from Huawei. Therefore, before you move on to the next lecture, I would like you to do some research on why US is fighting with a Chinese company. So US is not only fighting with the Chinese government, it is also fighting with one of the Chinese company called Huawei. And another question is, why Huawei? Why not other Chinese company? Because there's a lot of big Chinese company in the US. Why US is not forbidding Alibaba, for example, which is a bigger company than Huawei? By now, students should have a better understanding on how just even one political issue can affect thousands of businesses. And in this case, it is affecting 1,300 different businesses in China. It is affecting more than 100 businesses in US. Before students move on to the next lecture, I would like you to do 2 things. So the first thing is to do a quick research on why is US fighting with the company Huawei. And certainly not every company has as big as damage as Huawei in terms of total revenue. So the second thing that I would like you to do is to do a research on what are the other well-known companies that get affected by this Chinese-US trade war. Because in reality, this 25% increase in tariff pushes a lot of companies out of business, and as a result, a lot of the people lose their jobs. Main aim of asking the students to create a PowerPoint that summarizing the effects of these political issues for US-Chinese trade war is to let the student have better understanding how devastating, how severe is the damage to the business operations. So for the students, don't forget to upload your PowerPoint slides into the StudySmart, as this one will count as your attendance. Thank you everyone for coming for discuss, and I'll see you in the next one.